Hello, everyone. Welcome to Inside D2Football special playoff reaction show. We just saw the unveiling of the 2024 Division II football championship bracket, just like all of you did a short time ago. We have had a little bit of time here to consume some of that, think about some of the matchups. We've already queued up some of our picks for the upcoming playoff round. Also, have already considered our picks for regional champions and for the national championship. So we'll run through those a little bit later on in the show. But first off, guys, I'm happy to be here. It's been a long 12 weeks just to get to this point in the season. This was kind of for all of us as a group, this was a year like no other. Really happy that we got through the regular season. Really proud of all of the great work that we were able to do and all of the content we put out. And really happy that we're now ready to get into the playoff run and crown a new national champion. So before we can start making picks and diving into matchups and the games and all of that, we need to talk about our playoff field. So, Whit, why don't we start with the way the NCAA queued this up? They started this tradition a couple of years ago where about an hour before we see the full playoff field, they celebrate each of the top seeds in the four super regions. So they kind of give them some individual attention, give them a little bit of extra limelight before we see the rest of the field. And we saw the four top seeds released about 5 o'clock Eastern this evening. Don't think we had any surprises here. I think we knew exactly what to expect in each of the four regions. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, Chuck, we had kind of discussed the idea maybe Wingate would, maybe get that SR2 because of the fact that they were the top team in terms of KPI nationally. But, I think Valdosta has just done too much over these last 2 weeks. And, deservedly is at the number one seed in SR2. That's kind of the one that really jumped out to me. And, we also thought that Pueblo might have to beat out Augustana in that SR4 race. And with Augustana losing, that kind of, took that out of the equation. And I think everything else was fairly straightforward.
Yeah, I thought the Valdosta State Wingate switch that happened last week pretty much laid it out that it was probably going to stay that way this week. I think that there was a compelling argument for Wingate to be the top seed in that region. And Charleston and Kutztown were very close. We'll talk about that a little bit more here when we get into the super region bracket in just a minute. But I think they were very, very close in all of their credentials. But we did kind of think that Kutztown had a slight edge there that put them over the top. So all of the number one seeds now get the first round bye. Very important for all of them. So they'll actually be off. All four of these teams will be off this coming Saturday. And of course, for any playoff games they will play through the regional finals, they will have home field advantage. So congrats to all four of those teams. That is a very big deal to earn that ranking. But let's go through each of the four super regions. So we have the brackets for the four quads of the four parts of this bracket. So we're going to go through each one of them, kind of give some overall reactions. We won't make picks at this part of the show. We're going to pick all 12 first round games when we get to a later point in the show. So you'll get our thoughts on all those matchups specifically and who we're going to pick. But for now, guys, let's just kind of react to the bracket as we see it. So, of course, we saw Kutztown as the top seed. And, of course, that left Charleston as the number two. I don't think there was any doubt at all about them being the top two seeds in that region. It was pretty interesting that California actually stayed in the third position despite the loss over the weekend to Kutztown. They went into last weekend third. They come out of that final round of the regular season also in third and getting a home playoff game. And, of course, they stayed ahead of Slippery Rock, who comes in at fourth because of a head-to-head win a couple of weeks ago. So those are going to be our hosts for the first round, Slippery Rock, California, and Charleston. I think the thing that stands out to me here, and I haven't quite figured this out, and it hasn't really been that long, so maybe there's some things we haven't fully considered or been able to dive into, but even in Slippery Rock, that is a regular season rematch. They played back in week one. Not really sure why they landed on that as a rematch here. So New Haven could bus to Slippery Rock. They could also bus to California. Charleston would be a flight, so obviously that's out. We wouldn't want to do that. But I think there was an opportunity there to avoid a first round rematch that didn't really need to happen. So that's kind of my initial reaction. Kind of go around the room here a little bit. K-Ferg, anything that you see here that's kind of either eye-opening or anything that stands out to you?
four PSAC teams, and I think that just speaks to the strength of the other conferences, right? Like there wasn't anybody that really challenged Charleston. There wasn't, the GMAC was a kind of a nobody really wanted to be here. Felt like.
Right.
So I'm here. And then the Northeast 10, and they were struggling as well to get more than one viable contender beyond maybe even Assumption as a second option. So, I think just there was an intra-conference matchup that was going to happen here. But I'm like you. I thought, maybe you would put New Haven with Cal and go at it that way. Then what happened? But everything else was pretty predictable here.
Yeah, I think when we went through the rankings this morning, kind of looking at all the data, I think this is pretty much exactly what we landed on. Of course, we didn't know exactly how they'd pair the matchups. Interesting for the GMAC, and Findlay actually did finish the season with the best record in the GMAC, 9-2 versus 8-3 for Ashland, 8-3 for Tiffin. But I think they made the right choice here, guys, because Findlay was clearly the third best team in the GMAC and kind of a distant third place team. They weren't very competitive in those losses to Ashland or Tiffin. I watched that entire game yesterday with Tiffin, thinking that that potentially is going to determine a playoff spot. In some ways, it did because it put Ashland into the field here. So I think it was the right choice for Ashland to be the top rated GMAC team here in this region. So. Anybody see a team in here that might be a little bit of a spoiler, like somebody that might win a game or two that maybe we don't necessarily think could happen? Wait, let me go to you first. You see anybody here that might potentially upset this bracket a little bit?
I'm curious about Ashland. Physical football team. They have played better teams on their schedule than most of the teams here in terms of full body of work. And they played a tougher schedule than Charleston's faced. So that said, I think Ashland is going to be a formidable opponent. I don't know if they have the offense to keep up with the Charleston, who can be a very potent team scoring the football. But that would be the kind of the one I have my eye on. And, we kind of saw this creeping up yesterday with the whole Findlay thing, them getting beaten by Tiffin the way they were. The thought was, okay. And I think we've all kind of had this thought on our mind that don't count out Ashland because they were the best team in that conference, and now they've made it on in. So that's the one that kind of stands out to me the most.
Yeah, I kind of think East Stroudsburg is a team that I have my eye on here. They probably feel underserved a little bit as a 10-1 football team, and we've talked about that a little bit. They just didn't necessarily have the opponents that were going to help give them a strong strength of schedule, give them some of the other credentials that are really important in how these rankings play out. But they probably feel like this game should be on their home field. I think maybe they'll play with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. Definitely going to play with a lot to prove. I kind of like them getting Cal on a rebound here, having just faced Kutztown. Of course, when the Stroudsburg coaches look at that film, they'll get a really, really good indication with how they're going to match up because they know Kutztown so well. So I think it could be a good first round rematch there for the Warriors. Coach Poe, anything you see here in this bracket that you'll keep an eye on here in the first round?
Yeah, I think I agree with what you said, Whit. I think the Ashland-Charleston game is intriguing for a lot of reasons. I don't know that one, I think it's a pretty evenly matched game. And if Ashland does come out and win that game, that doesn't surprise me as much. But I want to go back to the thing you just said, Chuck, too. Just we talk about we want to avoid, rematches. And Slippery Rock New Haven played week 1. And I get it. On paper, it's a rematch. But those two football teams are completely different from week 1 to now. And so it's not like we're saying, hey, they just met 2 weeks ago, a week ago, and they're playing again. No, we're talking 10-week span. So I think you're going to see two completely different football teams in this game. So for that, it doesn't bother me as much, only because, again, there's so much time in between. I think both these football teams are going to be a little bit different. They've evolved, they've developed, they figured out more what they can do. And so I think if you watch this game compared to that last time they played, I think you're going to see a completely different football game.
Yeah. So, Tony, if we think all the way back to the preseason, we picked some teams that might be on a bounce back that maybe didn't make the playoffs last year that might be in the playoffs. Ashland was your pick through some ups and downs throughout the season. Here they are. They are in the playoffs. I mean, that's a tough trip to go down to a Charleston team that's just been red hot all year. Do you think maybe they could pull off a little bit of a surprise down there?
Yeah, I'm a glutton for the roller coaster stuff with Ashland and a bunch of other teams that I've picked throughout the year. But the funny thing is, guys, I like what Coach Post said about Slippery Rock, and I almost wonder if Slippery Rock isn't a team that might not be able to go further in this bracket than being on the 4 line might suggest. I think the team that intrigues me the most is probably Charleston. And I mean, they got the nation's leading rusher. That's always going to be, something you can hang your hat on, is being able to run the ball. I agree with Witt that maybe they haven't faced defenses week in and week out like they might even see this weekend with Ashland. But that's a team that, I mean, if you really stop and look at it, they've been pretty doggone consistent all year, really haven't been tested. And maybe that's a tip of the cap to just how good they really are. And I think, as they get through the later rounds, they get past Ashland. I'm really interested to see what they start to do in a second or a third round game and try and see if they can't get out of the region. I think that's the team that I probably have the least amount of, I don't want to say familiarity with, but I mean, that's the team that probably has the best record and maybe some of the best pieces in terms of their offense that really has never done anything outside of maybe winning a game or two in the tournament. They haven't come out of the region. And I'm wondering if this is the year that maybe they do that.
Fair point.
Yeah. Great take. I got to see Charleston up close, several weeks back, and I was very, very impressed with them. By the way, before we move off of that, a shout out to Siobhan Wright. We have talked about him quite a bit this year. With his performance yesterday, he eclipsed 2,000 rushing yards for the season. That's an amazing accomplishment in an 11-game season. 37 rushing touchdowns. So that actually ties the Division II single season record that was set in 2007 by Xavier Oman of Northwest Missouri. That was actually through the playoff run. X actually had 37 rushing touchdowns that year, but a lot of them came in the playoffs. So for Siobhan to have done that in an 11-game season is quite remarkable. So congratulations to him. Congratulations to Charleston.
That's my
so Ferg must have had him in fantasy because
it was my first round selection.
Well, we're certainly very happy to see that he's had a monster season. I guess one closing remark here in this region, I have to really thank Slippery Rock. I mean, obviously they can't look any further than playing New Haven. They know New Haven. They're a formidable team. They got to beat them this weekend. But I got to think Slippery Rock just really, really wants to get a shot at Kutztown. I know that they expected to play them in the PSAC championship game this year. Didn't work out that way for them, and I'm sure they still have some wounds from the 2 losses that happened last year to the Golden Bears. So I imagine that they are very excited to get these playoffs going there at the Rock. So that's a look at our SR1 bracket. Whit, take us into Super Region 2, where there's not really a whole lot to unpack here. Really, to be honest, we can just kind of breeze through this. Actually, of all the regions, I think this was the toughest to predict, particularly the unseeded teams. I think we felt pretty good who the top 4 were going to be and in what order they were likely to land. The unseeded teams is where we really had a lot of question marks. I know I could have seen this going a lot of different ways. But before we get into that, I know we talked about it being really close there with Wingate Valdosta. I think, Valdosta is your only undefeated team in the region is a good choice. That puts Wingate at 3rd. West Alabama at 3rd. We haven't talked about them for a couple weeks. Congrats to them getting a home playoff game. And how about Miles? 9 wins in a row. Made the top 25 last week. Won the SIAC championship game yesterday and played themselves into a home playoff game. So huge accomplishment there for them. But I think the story here is probably in the unseeded teams, who made it, who didn't. So I'm going to go right to K Ferg. I think you probably have a lot of reactions here. He says no, but do you want to just drop from the show, have a little bit of wine, and come back later?
Let me put down my textbook right now because yes, I have some things we need to talk about. Okay, so first of all, I haven't done this all season, but I actually need to break out the wine for this one because this is just too much for me. This is just too much. First of all, let's talk about something here. The committee, right? Super Region 2 committee had a tough choice to make, right? You had 6 teams that were vying for 3 spots. The 3 you see on your screen, Winston-Salem State and Emory and Henry and Johnson C. Smith. And you get to this scenario where you got to figure out what you're going to do here. Like, granted, yes, you got a lot of viable teams, and I'm very disappointed because the criteria, the way that the criteria is laid out, you got Virginia Union in here as a 7, right? And it's like, okay, well, Johnson C. Smith beat them, right? So there's your head-to-head. Just like if you're Emory and Henry beat both Lenore Ryan and they beat Carson Newman. You have some head-to-heads here, and they're all relatively close in ranking. But it just feels like a bit of a disservice, and it's quite honestly, it feels very disrespectful to the CIAA because you got all these teams that are pretty much evenly matched. You got Winston State, whose numbers were actually better than Johnson C. Smith and better than VUU, and yet they got to deal with the head-to-head with Johnson C. Smith pulling them down. And so I just felt like if you're going to throw head-to-head out the window, which is kind of what you did with Virginia Union here and what you also did with Carson Newman and Lenore Ryan, well, then you're going back to quantitative measures and you're going back to numbers here. And it just feels like to throw 3 South Atlantic teams in here like this, it's infuriating, honestly. It feels like the goalposts have moved here, and it just doesn't feel right at all. When you've got that many teams that are so close in terms of the numbers, that you put 3 teams from the SAC in, it just doesn't feel good, quite honestly. It just doesn't feel good. And I'll just end it there to be very respectful.
Well,
then we go to our corner and cry.
If you could take somebody out and bring somebody in, if it was that simple, who would be your first team you take? Would you take Carson Newman out?
I would take Lenore Ryan out.
Lenore Ryan. And I think this is a really interesting scenario. If you could bring somebody in, so you're looking at Johnson C. Smith, Winston-Salem State, and Emory and Henry, I think, is somebody who just did not get enough respect from the committee through this whole process. But who do you think is the team that would come in? Is it Johnson C. Smith? Yeah,
I think if you just go by the criteria, right? Like This is not even being a homer. Just go by the criteria. Yes, Johnson C. Smith lost their last 2 games. I get it. They were vying for a 1 or 2 seed. They lost those 2 games. But at the end, when you're looking at this criteria and you're looking at, you got VUU in there, for them to just leapfrog over JCSU just throws part of that criteria out, and I don't think that's right. I mean, I think Emory Henry also got shafted here. I understand that the strength of schedule wasn't as good but head-to-head matters. It matters here.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think to kind of talk a little bit more about where Fergus going, we've kind of thought each week in the Super Region that Emory and Henry has kind of been getting a bad deal from the very beginning of the regional rankings. We thought that because of the head-to-head and where they were at with things, they should have been in a better spot than they were on the page. Now, by this point, yeah, like Ferg mentioned, their strength of schedule hurts them now that we have a complete picture. I did not have Carson Newman on the page. By the time I got done with it, with all the emphasis being put on KPI leading up to this point, I thought it was inconsistent to have them on the page. I felt that Johnson C. Smith should have been what would be on the equivalent of the 6 line, and Virginia Union the 7 line. And Virginia Union got a big bump in those measures with their championship win with the CIAA. So that's kind of how I saw it. That was about the only thing I really saw, different when in terms of who made the field. Chuck, did you still have Carson Newman? Or which, because obviously it's so close that, Chris mentions Lenore Ryan, I mentioned Carson Newman, and, at the same time, Johnson C. Smith ends up not making it. So that's how tough this was.
Well, this is why you have committees to talk through things, because when I did this on my own early this morning, I did have Carson Newman in the field. And then the more I looked at it, and then I talked with you a little bit later in the day, and we went through some data and we started to poke some holes in things, as it's normally what you would try to do. I think we both came to the conclusion that we would take Carson Newman out and have Johnson C. Smith in. I think when you look at the full body of work, Johnson C. Smith looks like a playoff resume. Now, those last two losses, and I have to think this really hurt them in the conversation. Those last two losses, not only losing to a Fayetteville State team that was under 500, but they got shut out. It was a really, really bad look. And then you had a chance to still salvage that. They were still in playoff position after that game, even after that bad performance. And you come back and you lose to Livingstone. So I kind of think that the committee really just held that against them. And despite the fact that the whole package, which is what they're supposed to look at, the whole body of work, despite that looking like a playoff resume, I think they really looked at those two games and said, this isn't a playoff team.
Yeah.
Poe, what do you think? Do you think it probably is something that came down to a discussion like that?
So I think it does. I think they've identified criteria that they use in their evaluation process. We'll never know what that is, but whatever it is, I look at that, and based on what we've said, so I don't disagree. And I think what they looked at was the two losses that they had. John C. Smith just had the last 2 weeks, and we would probably say they were not good losses, but they were two losses. But if you look at Carson Newman's losses, who'd they lose to?
Wingate, Emory, and Henry.
Right. We just sat here and said Emory and Henry's a good team that's been shafted. And then their second loss was against Wingate, the number 2 team in you know what I mean? So they're not – so if we're comparing – if we're comparing losses to losses, we just said that their losses aren't bad losses like we said that Johnson C. Smith's are. I don't know if that was a decision maker, but just looking at it from that lens as well. When I look at this bracket, I'm excited. I watched the Miles play yesterday. They looked great yesterday. I'm really excited to see them. I'm excited to see them play Carson Newman and host a playoff game. I'm really, really excited about that. I think Lenore Ryan going down to West Alabama is going to test them. I think it's an intriguing matchup. It's one that I think is going to exploit maybe the wrong words, but I think West Alabama does some stuff really good that may put Lenore Ryan in a pinch and see some things that they don't see very often. It's going to challenge their defense. And then I think the other side of that, I think West Alabama is going to their defense is going to have to step up. And then that Wingate game, I think the challenge is to stop Jada Byers, right, guys? Like, you got to shut down Jada Byers. You got to make the rest of the team beat you offensively if you're Wingate. So I think there's some really intriguing matchups here. I think we all would have done these brackets, and everybody even watching the show would have done these brackets, and the whole thing would be different for everybody. This one, we talked about it all week, and we've talked about it kind of off air. This super region, there was so much we didn't know how it was going to shake out, and there was no pandemonium yesterday. Everything kind of fell the way we thought it was going to fall. And this is, it's whatever the evaluation that they used. It coulda, woulda, shoulda, but hey, I think you said it earlier, Whit, just win, man. Just win, and you're not in these situations, right? Like, don't drop 2 games. Don't lose another. If you win out and you're 10-0, you're going to be in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think all that makes good sense. But yeah, I think applying all the criteria consistently across all the teams is a little bit difficult too, because we talked about some of those more recent performances. I mean, Lenore Ryan had to salvage their game with a walk-off field goal in the last play of the game against Anderson of all teams. So they're not going in off of a real inspiring performance as well. So,
but I think Chuck, that's I don't want to say it's a lack of transparency, right? But we don't know what they're evaluating on in that meeting room. Like, we don't know what the committee looks at. We don't know what they value. We know what they tell us, but we don't know the actual how the conversations go. And until that transparency happens, it's going to be frustrating. Like, I feel you, Ferg. Like, it's just going to be frustrating.
It's foul, man. It's foul. It's foul. I'm just not very happy about this at all, because it's foul. Like, you got all these, like, if you're using KPI, like, again, you have to go back to Winslow State. Like, if you're going to throw all that out, Winslow State has a higher KPI than all of them. If you're going to do head-to-head, then that matters. Then you've got 2 teams that have a grievance here. it just there's a lot of ways to slice this, a lot of different ways, and it's just foul.
Yeah, it is tough because, I did not see a path for Winston-Salem State at all because of their head-to-head losses to Johnson C. Smith and Virginia
Right.
Union. Now,
Right.
you don't compare teams just within the teams from their conference. You compare them to the whole field. But even if you do just kind of group those CIAA teams, I thought Winston-Salem State's probably the third team in line there because they lost to both of those teams ahead of them. But then if you're going to apply head to head, you kind of need to do that consistently across the bracket. So we don't know exactly, what they thought was the most important here. So this was interesting. This was definitely the toughest one to call, especially with those unseeded teams. So this is the bracket that we have, and we do have some good matchups here that we're looking forward to this coming weekend. So, all right. Well, I knew that one would take a little while to unpack, but we had a lot happening there. Super Region 3, typically the most stacked region in the bracket. Definitely the case again this year. 6 of the 7 teams that made it are one-loss teams. I think there were 4 10-1 teams in this bracket, a couple 9-1 and an 8-2. So, man, it is a full field. Ferris gets the top seed, Grand Valley at number 2, so good representation there for the GLIAC, and then the MIAA. Third, Pittsburgh State. Again, we talked about them last week. Should they be third, or were they a little bit too high? But with nothing really changing the way these rankings were going to look coming out of this past weekend, they stay at 3 with Central Oklahoma at 4. Those are our seeded teams. And then you can see the matchups. Indianapolis not going to Pittsburgh State this year. They're going to play Grand Valley. Harding going to Pittsburgh State. That is definitely one to keep an eye on. And then Ouachita going to Central Oklahoma. I think Ouachita going on the road might actually be good for them. They have not had a lot of success in the playoffs. And a lot of times that's been playing at home recently after playing the Battle of the Ravine, which is obviously a huge thing. We saw that yesterday. Packed house, all the excitement. Playoff games sometimes have a little bit of a different vibe. It just feels differently. Might be good for Ouachita to go on the road this year. So I don't know. You guys, a lot of expertise on Super Region 3 here. Tony, I'm going to start with you, kind of give you the platform to give us your reactions. I don't think there were any surprises here with this bracket, but just some overall reactions about what you see from these matchups.
You're right. There weren't a lot of surprises, in part just because this is what it was a week ago, and everybody held serve. And that seems to be that in this region in particular, over the last stretch of years, teams have a hard time holding serve over the last couple of weeks of the season. But, to watch Ouachita be able to get that win in the Battle of the Ravine, you see Central, play well against Emporia in a game that you kind of felt like they were the better team going in, but they still hold serve and do what they had to do. And then Pitt State to kind of, put the end of the season for Northwest. I think those were all performances that we all kind of anticipated. And honestly, Ferris, did a pretty good job yesterday too. You watch that game against Davenport, they won by 15 points, but that game was closer than it looked. Davenport moved the ball pretty well throughout a lot of that game. And if they could get a couple of those drives to finish in the end zone, that game's looking a lot different going down the stretch than it did. So we saw, kind of still everybody figure out a way to win and hold serve. So I think the thing that strikes me the most about this is if you look at the bottom half of that bracket, it definitely looks more physical to me to get to the final than the top half. Maybe I'm wrong there, but I just look at what Ferris would have to face in a second round game, and there's not as much physicality as I see with a Harding and a Pitt State and a Grand Valley on the bottom side of that bracket. So whoever comes out of that bottom side will probably have played maybe just a hair more of a meat grinder. But I'm open to anybody who's got a rationale that would say otherwise.
Well, Tony, I tell you, when I see Harding and Pitt State, I mean, that's got to be the matchup of the first round, right? I mean, when you look at this, I mean, given who Pitt State has played, some of the big games they've won, they have also had some losses.
Yeah.
And, Harding's going to have to go on in there and go against a team who is good against the run. We got a chance to see them up close with how they did against Ferris and so forth. So fascinating first round matchup for sure. And Harding, the path they have doesn't include them playing at home. So there's a lot that really comes out of this.
Yeah.
Something that caught my eye is, Central Oklahoma. We were talking by the middle of the season, Jed Huff was their quarterback, was in the race for the Harlan Hill Award. He's not starting right now. Dawson Hurl is starting, who is a guy who's been in the league for a few years in the MIAA with Missouri Southern, and he can run a little bit more. And he had a big game this last game against Emporia, and obviously they trust him. But it's interesting, UCO's going through a little bit of uncertainty during this time. And, you got OBU coming in to play them. Indianapolis, if they were in a different super region, I'd give them a better chance to scratch a win here. I think that they're probably a better team than we've given them credit for, just because the fact that they're in the GLVC and they play a strength of schedule that's not high. But at the same time, it's just that's a tough draw for them right away with Grand Valley.
Yeah, it is, and I think you're right. If we saw them a little more often against teams, week in and week out, that we felt like we're a little bit more of a test, we'd probably be talking a bit more about them. But I mean, that's a team with Gavin Sukup run at the helm.
Mm-hmm.
They can move the ball, and he's had some pretty major games this year. And their only loss was the Saginaw Valley, and we saw Saginaw Valley play really toe-to-toe with both Ferris and Grand Valley, and yet drop a couple of games where you kind of wonder what the heck were they thinking, especially as the game wore on. So, I mean, if you're Grand Valley, you're looking at this going, okay, it's about what you expected, but you're looking at that game going, geez, Indianapolis hasn't won a game in this region in a lot of years, but it doesn't mean that that's not going to be a scary game for you in the first round, because this is a team that can come in and move the football on you. And while Grand Valley's defense is really good, Grand Valley's still going to have to score some points. And over the last few weeks, it's been a little bit of a roller coaster with them too. So that, for as much as that's a 2-7 game, you usually think that's going to be the most uneven of the matchups. I look at that game, and that's actually just as intriguing to me as any of the other two.
Yeah, I think you made a great point about the physicality in the bottom half of that bracket. So, the winner of that Harding-Pitt State game is going to have to go on and assumably play Grand Valley. We're not going to gift it to them yet, because you just said UIndy's a formidable opponent. We're not going to gift a win there to Grand Valley, but we feel pretty confident Grand Valley wins that. So the winner of Harding and Pitt State then has to go play Grand Valley. That is a tough 2-game stretch. We know the Lakers went through that last year. With their path. So that's going to be a really, really tough physical path for whoever comes out of that win in that first round. All right. That puts a bow on Super Region 3. We know we'll be spending a lot of time talking about those matchups throughout the playoffs. Whit, Super Region 4, this is kind of your home region, probably the one that you know the best. It's actually also our smallest in terms of the numbers of teams involved. Once again, I don't think that there were any surprises here, but there were some results that impacted the final bracket that we got. So this does look a little bit different than it did at the start of yesterday. Walk us through some of the events from yesterday that kind of impacted the bracket we landed on.
Yeah, Augustana was solid on the 2 line going into yesterday. They lose at Bemidji. Low-scoring game. Bemidji gets a bit of a bump from this in terms of they solidified their spot in the field. And, you go ahead and you take a look at Western Colorado, with a one-sided win over Colorado Mesa. They go ahead and move up to the 2 line because they kind of really made their resume much better than it looked coming into this week. And then at the same time, Mankato kind of gets blown out a little bit at Duluth. I mean, that game was getting kind of worse as it went. They got it down to 2 scores in garbage time, but Mankato couldn't get their offense going in that football game. And so it now goes ahead and gives us a little bit of a different bracket. And, I had kind of 2 thoughts going into looking at this bracket. The first one was, we thought that if anything was going to happen where we're going to see a regional switch with teams, that maybe, because right now we have 2 flights here with Central Washington going to Western Oregon and then Bemidji flying to Angelo. Certainly these 2 are pretty long distances. We thought there was a chance that maybe they would cut it down to 1 flight by sending Mankato on over to Pitt in Super Region 3 and trade Wichita Baptist back and send them to Angelo, which would have gotten rid of a flight. I don't know if the committee didn't see it, but essentially they didn't go that way. And, we always kind of figure that they're going to go in a more traditional way and stay within the super regions. I don't think there's a huge appetite at the national level to do a lot of that trading. And then moving past that, now that I look at this, Chuck, I got to be honest with you. I'm not real excited about my super region here, Chuck, because the game at the top, Mankato at Augustana, is a rematch of the first round last year in the same exact spot.
Right. We just saw this game. What was it, a couple weeks ago?
This will be the 4th time these 2 teams will have played in the last 2 years. So I'm thrilled about that, as you can imagine.
Yeah, right.
Right. So then at the bottom, Chuck, we also have a rematch. Central Washington at Western Colorado. So the only new game we have is Bemidji going to play a Texas team. It's not UTPB this time like last year. It's Angelo State. So this is looking a whole lot like last year's bracket, right. Totally unintentionally.
Right. And to be fair, that's not a criterion for the committee to try to avoid rematches from last year. They're supposed to try to avoid rematches from the regular season, although we missed that opportunity in Super Region 1, which we already touched on. So, yeah, these are rematches from last year, but that's not something the committee is instructed to try to avoid.
Right. And then the Colorado team, instead of it being Mines, it's Pueblo. So, it doesn't feel real new to my kind of interests. But at the same time, Bemidji at Angelo is a real interesting matchup, I think. And Angelo's been playing great football. And, Western Colorado, I think that they're feeling like this is going to be a get back for them. And, Central Washington kind of struggled yesterday, Chuck, against Western Oregon in a 3-3 rock fight at half. And, they end up sneaking out of that game with the win. But now they got to go on the road. So I think Minnesota State, Mankato, and Augie, Augie's won 3 in a row there. So Minnesota State's going to have to kind of figure out how to slay them. But Pueblo, I can't help but think is in a pretty good spot overall when I look at this entire thing, Jeff.
Well, we're going to do our picks for the regions where we'll reveal who we all think is going to win each of these regions. But when I look at this bracket, I could see a path for any of these 7 teams winning this region. And I don't think I can say that about the other 3 super regions.
I would say it's more open. Yeah.
I'm not saying this is the best region, but when I look at the other 3 super regions, I think there's probably some teams that I could say I just don't see them getting all the way through. Even in 3, I look at some teams like Indy and Washita. I just don't see them getting that far. In this bracket, I could see any of these 7 teams being the last team standing.
Sure.
That's actually a really keen observation, Chuck. I agree. This is the most wide open and interesting to me of the 4.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, Whit, I know you'd love to see some different rematches or some different matchups.
I got the rematch.
You'd love to see some different match. I know you'd probably like to see a new team coming to Sioux Falls to play Augie. That'd be very exciting for you. But certainly from my perspective on the other end of the country, I look at these matchups and I say, it's going to be some fun football to watch. So I'm excited about all of these.
And before we move on, there's been a fair amount of questions in our comments area, and in general about should Sioux Falls have been on that last entry instead of Minnesota State. The reality of it is that Minnesota State, Bemidji State, and Sioux Falls were all sitting there with 3 losses, and they were all 3 of those teams were trying to make the dance, but only 2 of them were going to be allowed in. And if we're taking a look at the criteria, Sioux Falls has a lower strength of schedule than the 2 of them. They've all beaten each other interchangeably, so that's a moot point. And in that KPI, Sioux Falls was below the other two, which were a virtual tie between them. So I think that's just kind of how this played on out. And I feel like Mankato actually would have been on the 6th line per se, and Bemidji was the last team in. And I think that when you listen to the broadcast today, they alluded to that as well. So at that point, that little tiebreaker wouldn't work because Mankato would have a separator in between them. That's kind of my take on it. When you have 3 losses, Chuck, I don't think any of the teams can feel entitled per se to a spot.
Agreed.
You just have to hope that you end up being your name gets called on Sunday.
Everybody wants to make it, but certainly if you're Sioux Falls, and I know you get blown up a lot because you live there in town and a lot of people know you, but I think you can feel really good about being a 3-8 team last year and being an 8-3 team this year, who was right on the cusp of making the playoffs. So you have a hell of a lot to be proud of. So take that into the off season and and feel really good about it. So, Whit, anything else that we need to unpack here from SR4 before we kind of go on to our next segment?
I don't think so.
All right. Well, you are going to have a playoff game there in Sioux Falls, and I know that there'll probably be a really good visiting contingent coming from Mankato, as there typically would be. Now, I know that when some of the folks travel from Mankato, there's probably going to be some meetups. You probably will enjoy maybe some breakfast or some brunch. Before the folks from Mankato leave town, where should they get some carry out to fuel up for the drive home?
Did everybody else kind of see the way Chuck was leading us towards the sponsor there? Chuck, we were chugging along right along there.
Beautiful.
Yeah, Chuck, that was well played. I have not had dinner yet, and I can guarantee you this will be on my speed dial here when we get done. I'm not sure if I could finish the show looking at this. I'm getting so hungry, but certainly, and I'm sure my guy Laker and the Mavs Mafia come into Sioux Falls will want to go somewhere and eat some food, and we'll have to probably try and figure that out. Some of the board brothers from our message forum, and that'll be a good time. And in addition to that, Chuck, we need to have a little bit of a question here for the panel and the comments. Chuck, are you a bone-in or a boneless person here? Which way do you go on the debate, Chuck?
Well, I like to think I'm pretty indiscriminate, but if I had a choice, I will go boneless.
Coach Poe? Oh, I'm sorry, I caught you in the middle of a cough, sneeze, or something or other. Which way are you going on this?
Man, I'm a more of a traditional guy. I'm a drum guy. Yep.
So you're bone in.
Right.
So right side of the diagram, there's a drum right there that looks like it's got plenty of jazz on it too. Tony, which way are you going?
I see the merits to both arguments, but the only thing I can point to and say, okay, that's actually real food is going to be the bone in. So that tends to be where I go. The boneless, you never know what the heck they're doing with that.
And the comments are lighting up with some good feedback on this topic, as I pretty much expected. Ferg, help us determine which way that we go on this one.
I'm bone in.
Ferg with the correct answer.
Ooh, I'm on an island. All right.
You know what, Chuck? I'm good with the boneless if I am doing something where I can't be digging all in and everything. If I'm remote somewhere, at some game or something, okay, I can do boneless because I don't need to have that whole wing extra residue situation that happens, or maybe I just fall for it. But the bone in is what I will take each time on this. So I appreciate those in the comments going ahead and giving their thoughts about this. It looks like bone in was winging. Get it?
Man, this has me missing from my days living in North Carolina. I miss the Zaxby's chain. Zaxby's boneless buffalo wings for me was definitely a go-to.
By the way, boneless making a comeback in the comments. But Chuck, let's go ahead and let's mow through and congratulate some conference champions.
Yeah, we're going to go through this pretty quickly. Obviously, there are 15, actually 16, because we have one that's shared. But so we're going to go through this quickly. But we thought it was important to recognize all of the conference champions. It always makes me smile a little bit when I see these team pictures, at the end of the season, with your championship. Honestly, even when you see some of the player pictures and team pictures, even from teams that aren't going on to the postseason, when it's that final game of the year, final game with their teammates, it's always fun to see those pictures. So we wanted to celebrate some of our conference champions. So wait, I'll just take over the screens here for a moment. We'll run through these.
Yeah,
so that's the
absolutely.
Charleston Eagles. That's actually from a couple of weeks ago because they won the conference championship with a game or two to spare. So that's Charleston winning their second straight Mountain East championship. Same for Kutztown, Golden Bears, second straight PSAC championship. Won it at home last year over Slippery Rock. They win it this year on the road at California. Golden Bears have not lost a regular season game since week 2 last year. That actually was at California. So congrats to Kutztown, our PSAC champion. New Haven wins the Northeast 10 again. There they are celebrating on the blue turf up there in West Haven, Connecticut. So another great season up there for the Chargers. And Ashland, despite the unexpected setback last weekend, they rally. They win the GMAC. So congrats to the Eagles, and they are on to the playoffs. Moving on to Super Region 2. Great picture there of Coach Jack in the middle. You can see him holding up the trophy, surrounded by all of the players. Undisputed conference championship. That was really important to them. They shared it last year. It was really important to them to win an undisputed, untied conference championship. There they are with the trophy. Congrats. Blazers, number 1 seed. Wingate, champions in the SAC. They win the SAC championship game. Virginia Union won a very tight defensive game yesterday with Virginia State. Really good ball game between those two teams. Virginia Union goes back-to-back. They are your CIAA champions. And great picture there of Coach Sam Slade and his Miles Golden Bears. They won their SIAC championship at home yesterday over Clark Atlanta. 9th straight win for Miles and into the playoffs. They're going to play at home again this coming Saturday. How about that? Big result for Miles with their conference championship. Ferris State back on top in the GLIAC. There's the team with the trophy. They actually had a couple of years where they had to watch Grand Valley celebrate the GLIAC championship. They reclaim the throne and take the top seed in Super Region 3. So congrats to the Bulldogs. Also in Super Region 3, I believe this was the only conference championship that was shared this year. So the GAC actually ended in a tie. So Harding and Ouachita will share that conference crown. Not the case in the MIAA. Central Oklahoma, your undisputed conference champion. I don't think many people would have predicted that at the start of the season. So congrats to them. Huge result there in Edmond. So congrats. UIndy, we already talked about them before. GLIAC or GLVC champions for about the 25th year in a row, even though that league's only existed for about 12 or 13. So congrats to the Greyhounds. Another championship. They're running out of rings for all the fingers. And back-to-back for Augie in the NSIC. Man, that conference has so many teams at the top that are really tight together. To win that league 2 years in a row, great accomplishment there for Augie. And there's Angelo State celebrating their Lone Star Conference Championship, undefeated through the Lone Star. Nice rebound for them after last year. Not quite as good, not quite up to their standards, so really nice bounce back for them. And rounding things out with the Thunderwolves. Pueblo, there's your champions in the RMAC. Also an undefeated conference champion. So congrats to all of our conference champions in Division 2. We wanted to take a few minutes just to celebrate all them, show those pictures. So really nice way to end the season for all those teams. And of course, all of them on to the playoffs.
Absolutely. Well, Chuck, this is about the time where we get into the part of the show I haven't been good at for a little while, most of the year. And we have in yellow, Chuck, the time where we really are going to measure who's best at this. For you know what, Justin, that regular season stuff's one thing. Some of us are really ready to turn it on, maybe even a few upset picks here in the playoffs. So Tony and I have been playing possum long enough.
No, I haven't.
At least that's where I'm going with this.
I just
all
right.
As everyone can see,
are we saying there's a regular season champion and a postseason champion?
That's kind of what we're going with. We haven't gotten that far yet in the deal, but you know what? We're strongly considering it.
Change the
No,
rules
this,
on the
no,
fly.
this isn't basketball. We don't do
We've
that.
all made the playoff field.
No,
we all got our
this
name
isn't-
called tonight.
No, this isn't basketball where you have a regular season champion and a tournament champion. We have one champion at the end of the season. This is football. Let's roll. All right. Now we are going to pick all the playoff games. We're going to do all 12. So we'll try to keep our commentary a little bit more abbreviated than we normally do because there's 12 games. But Whit, guide us through it, and we'll make our picks for all 12 first-round games.
Yeah, I get to record all of this. I'm really looking forward to it. So let's go, guys. Our opener, K-Ferg, you're starting us off here. New Haven at Slippery Rock. Who you got? K-Ferg, are you there?
Heavy Rock.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Good deal.
You missed the gesture there. He's going through.
Oh, I did. You know what? I'm sorry. I'm keeping track on the other page. You might need to talk into the mic. That'd be great. Okay. So,
blame it on me. I'm the one.
I gotta document all this. I can't be looking at you the whole time. Okay, Tony, who you got?
I was looking at him, and I didn't get it either, so it must be just because we're over it. I don't know.
Well, it's a good thing you didn't pick New Haven. You'd have to go over and flip the lights on and off. So,
Oh, gotcha. All right. So, Slippery Rock here as well.
Okay. Justin, who do you got?
Yeah, I'm not breaking stride. I'm taking Slippery Rock.
Okay. Chuckster, do you think New Haven going to go ahead on the road here? Plenty of offense, enough to win this game?
well, that was really their undoing the first time they played. They just couldn't finish drives. Slippery Rock really kind of set the tone for their season by winning with a little bit less offense, but a really stingy defense throughout most of their games. I think New Haven's going to have a little bit more for them than they did last time. I think this will be a close game, guys, but I do think Slippery Rock wins this at home.
Well, here we go. It's already happening. So, New Haven, I have liked what I've seen from their offense at times, but some of the games that have been played in the conference kind of lower scoring. But I'm not totally bought into the Slippery Rock offense this year the way I have been in recent years. I'm going to go with I'm down in the picks. We're going to take New Haven on the road here in this one.
All right.
Ashland, GMAC champ, going against the MEC champ, Charleston. Chuck, how do you like it?
I think Charleston wins this at home.
Whoop! And I inadvertently clicked the head.
Well, he's really excited about the next one.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
No, I like Charleston here. I mean, we talked about Ashland. Ashland has the potential to be a very dangerous team in the playoffs, but I think Charleston keeps it going.
Okay. Tony, how do you see it?
Yeah, I realized I talked up Ashland earlier in the year, but boy, they've sure laid some eggs in some weird spots, and they've won big in some weird spots. I don't see them winning this game. I think Charleston's got too much for them. I think Charleston, again, might be a little bit underrated, even though they're a 2 seed and they won undefeated. Obviously, we'll know after next Saturday, but I'm going to take Charleston as well.
Berg, how do you see it? I know that you are the head fanboy for the Javon Wright running back. Getting the Harlan Hill. Do you favor him here?
Yes, Charleston.
Good deal. How much does he run for?
150 yards.
How many scores?
2.
Okay. Berg offering fantasy interest for those. Justin, what do you got?
Yeah, I'm going to take Charleston. I think at home, their offense scoring 44 points a game. I like Charleston in this one. I
think Charleston is got a lot more to that offense than just the running back. And the 23 points a game for Ashland is concerning to me. Like they're going to have a hard time staying, with this one close enough. I also have Charleston, but I think this could be an interesting one with Ashland. I think they could keep it tough for a good while. East Stroudsburg going to Cal. K-Ferg, who do you like?
Cal.
Tony, who do you like?
Boy, I rode with Cal last week, and they didn't treat me right here, but I'll break from it. I'll take East Stroudsburg in the upset.
Fair enough. Coach Poe, where are you going on this one?
This is one I really don't know. I'm going to take East Stroudsburg. I don't know why. Just I got a gut feeling. 34
East
points.
Stroudsburg getting some love in the pick'em. Chuck, are you going with East Stroudsburg as well, Chuck?
I'm very tempted to. I think this is a tough spot for Cal. I was actually very impressed with their defense yesterday. I know that the scoring defense there doesn't look great. I was impressed with their defense yesterday in spots against Kutztown. I am very tempted to go East Stroudsburg here, but I'm actually going to go California.
You know, Chuck, in watching that game, Cal has got some electric players on offense, but I like what East Stroudsburg's doing overall and defensively, and I'm going to go ahead and take East Stroudsburg here. So we ended up having 3 folks taking East Stroudsburg in that one. Okay, we're moving on to Super Region 2. Carson Newman at Miles. Tony, who you got?
Miles.
Okay, good deal. Coach Poe, who are you leaning towards?
Yeah, so I think for me in this one, guys, I'm with you, Tony. I'm going to take Miles in it. I was not impressed. Carson Newman, I thought offensively struggled a little bit against Wingate. We know how good their defense is. I just feel like they've had some injuries at that quarterback position. Offensively, their production has declined a little bit, and I think it's right for Miles to win at home in a big game.
Berg, which way are you going here, buddy?
And the saltiness that I have at this moment, I'm also going to take Miles as well. Thank you.
Chuck, which are you taking Carson Newman and their option offense on the road here?
You know, a couple weeks ago, we probably all would have seen this very differently, but I too was very impressed with Miles. Got to watch a good bit of that game yesterday. 9-game winning streak, playing at home. I think Miles wins this game.
Yeah, I've had some uncertainty with Carson Newman down the stretch. They've won plenty of close games, but I think that I'm taking Miles also here. So Miles with the sweep. Moving on ahead, guys. Virginia Union at Wingate. Ferg, we saw this 2 years ago? Is that what we landed on?
A game happened then?
So, Ferg, we're going to come back to you on this. Let you gather some thoughts. Coach Poe, where are you going on this? Your Virginia Union fan base is curious.
Well, I've picked them the last 2 weeks. They let me down the first week. They held up to it this past week.
The drama.
I think I'm intrigued. I mean, you've got a pretty high-powered offense from Virginia Union, but we all know that Wingate defense is stingy. They don't give up a lot. They're playing at home. I'm going to take Wingate at home. I think the key is going to be, can they move the football and score? Are they explosive enough to do that? And can they contain Jada Byers? If they can do that, they're going to win. I'm going to take Wingate at home.
As Coach Poe moves in and out from the camera there.
Yeah.
He's creating some dramatic stuff there, Chuck. Chuck, which way are you going on this one?
I really like that Virginia Union was able to win a low-scoring game yesterday. They really had to kind of gut that out against Virginia State yesterday. I think this is going to be low-scoring. I think both defenses will really rise up in this game. I can see this as like a 17-14 kind of game, but I do think that Wingate's defense will prevail. I'm going to go with the Bulldogs.
Berg, are you going with the CIAA team, or are you going to deal with the wrath of not going with them?
Well, 2 years ago, we saw this game, and it was ugly early for Virginia Union.
That's right.
And my fear in this game is that they're probably throwing too many interceptions than I would feel comfortable with in this game. And so over the last 2 weeks, I don't have Virginia Union winning this game. I thought that it was this is a really bad matchup for VUU. I think because it's going to force. I think Wingate's going to force Union to pass, and that really scares me a little bit here. And I see you, Wingate's kicker. I see you. I see you out there in the chat.
Well, it's funny, before Ferg started talking about that, I thought to myself, stylistically, I don't like this matchup for Virginia Union with what they want to do offensively. And I'm going to go the same way with Ferg. I like Wingate in this one. Okay, moving right along, Lenore Ryan travels to West Alabama. Interesting ball game here. Coach Poe, I'm starting with you.
Yeah, this one's a very interesting matchup for me, guys. I'm really excited to see it. I do think West Alabama does some things that can give Lenore Ryan problems on the defensive side of the football. And then defensively, I think they're fast. West Alabama's fast defensively. They're going to be able to fast flow. They're going to have to get Jalen Ferguson off rhythm. They're going to have to keep him off balance and keep that offense guessing. I like West Alabama at home in this one, guys. I think this thing is going to be one of the better playoff games that we've seen here in a while. So I'm very excited about it, but I'm going to take West Alabama at home.
Chuck, which direction are you going on this one?
I'm going to go West Alabama here. I think Lenore Ryan's offense has been a little too inconsistent for me against bigger, better teams. We just don't see that explosive pop consistently that we've seen from them, and I think this will be one of the days that they're really going to have a difficult time establishing that. West Alabama gets after the quarterback. I think that they're going to make life very difficult for Jalen Ferguson, so I like the Tigers here.
Fair enough. Ferg, which direction are you leaning?
I hate to go against Ferguson, but unfortunately, he is also part of the saltiness that I breed, and therefore, West Alabama, and I think they're going to win. I hope they win by 30.
Tony, which way are you going?
I want to take Lenore Ryan to be contrarian, but I can't see my way to it. So I'll take West Alabama here, and I'll take Wingate in the last game since you didn't call on me.
Oh, you know what? I missed that. Well, guys, I have the same concerns. Lenore Ryan's offense has not shown well when I have watched them recently. I think this is going to be a heck of a game. I would not be surprised at all if Lenore Ryan won this game. I just personally don't have enough trust for them to be successful against a very good West Al defense. So I'll take West Al here at home. As we move through our next game, Wichita Baptist on the road after their big game of the Battle of the Ring win. They will be playing at Central Oklahoma. Pretty healthy drive here. 2 10-1 ball clubs. Coach Poe, which way are you going on this one?
Yeah, I think Wichita has a better defense, and I think that's going to be the difference in this ball game. Give me Wichita Baptist.
Okay. Ferg, which way are you going on this one?
Dear Wichita, we regret to inform you that your stay in the playoffs will only be for one game.
Ooh. Ferg's salty with games not affected by the reason he was unhappy. Chuck, who do you got?
I don't know whether he was honorary captain when he was out there at Wichita. He was out there for the coin toss.
Yeah, right? I mean, for heaven's sake.
Things have gone sideways since.
I don't know if this is an upset or not. I guess it depends on your take. I'm going Wichita here as well. Their offense worries me a little bit. They've had some struggles against good teams really establishing the offense, but their defense has played really well. It's carried them a lot. And I kind of just think that playing on the road is going to be something that they need to kind of get over the playoff hump here. I'm going to go with Wichita.
Chuck with a convincing argument. Tony, you like Wichita on the road?
No. I think their defense is good. I just don't think they've seen the kind of weapons this UCO is going to put on the field. These games are getting, I mean, some of them, it's playoffs. What the heck do you know? But I just got a hard time seeing Central Oklahoma dropping this one on their home field.
I think Central Oklahoma has gotten their offense kind of rebooted a little bit with Dawson Hurl. And I think they're going to be a real tough defend. They are a super athletic team. Mm-hmm. I like Central Oklahoma kind of going away in this one. We'll see. Moving along to Indy at Grand Valley. Chuck, I'll let you start it off.
I hope Indy can hang. I think that they can. Grand Valley the last couple weeks against teams that don't generally match up with them as favorably haven't been overwhelming. I think part of that's by design, to be honest with you a little bit, but I just don't see a win here for Indy, so I'm going to go with the Lakers.
Fair enough. Coach Poe, who you got?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Chuck on this one. I think Grand Valley just is too much for him, and so I'm going to take Grand Valley. But yeah.
Okay, Ferg, where you going, buddy?
I hope good things for Indy. I really do, but I think Grand Valley is just going to be a bit much.
Fair enough. Tony, do you echo those thoughts?
Yeah, I do, and Chuck's spot on. I think the Grand Valley's kind of looked a little odd on offense the last few weeks, but even without arguably their best defender yesterday, they still were pretty stout. I mean, basically the GLIAC's leading receiver didn't catch a pass till the fourth quarter yesterday. So I mean, the Laker defense is going to give Indianapolis fits, and even if they've got to figure some things out on offense, I think Grand Valley's D will keep them in this game. They should be able to win it.
I also have Grand Valley winning, but I am a little bit concerned with the Grand Valley offense. If this all of a sudden is a low-scoring 10-7 type of game at half, Grand Valley kind of doesn't tighten up a little bit and give Indy belief that they can win this one. I think Indianapolis is underrated, and as I mentioned before, I think they would do just fine in a lot of others in the other super regions, but they don't have that choice here. So I do have Grand Valley at home. I think they're as tough to beat at home as anybody in the field. Moving on into the big game, and I think the best first-round game there is. We've got Harding going to the Jungle to play Pitt State. K. Ferg, I'm leading off with you.
Oh yeah, this is a doozy of a first round. So it should be a pretty exciting matchup. We know Harding is going to have an opportunity to do some things because of their unconventional offense, and it's going to be really interesting to see how their defense lines up against Pitt and what they're able to do. I'm going to go with Pitt, but I say that saying, hey, either one of these teams go in. This is a very interesting matchup.
Absolutely. Tony, which way are you heading on this one?
I have no freaking idea. I think in general, we've seen that the teams that we consider to be elite defensively in the MIAA, traditionally in Northwest Missouri State, a Pittsburgh State, teams of that ilk, tend to be able to fare well when it comes to slowing down the flex bone.
Yep.
I think that can happen here. I think the thing that I'm a little uneasy about with Pitt State is just that offense at times has seemed a little uneven. And in a game like this, where you don't know for sure if they're going to be able to stop that keeping your defense off the field for extended periods of time is it going to be enough? I don't know. I actually like Pitt State in this game, but I'm going to take Harding just on a whim.
Okay. Chuck, which direction are you heading on this one, buddy?
Yeah, I think my talking points are very similar to Tony's. When a team plays Harding, they're either going to have something for that offense or they're not. And we just don't really know until we see them play. But, I do think Pitt State has the personnel that you need to have to be able to slow down that offense. We just don't really know if they're going to have the scheme and have the right game plan for it. I also just I don't have a ton of confidence in Pitt's offense. They've been inconsistent. At times they looked very good. I mean, I actually really liked what I saw from their offense when we were out there and saw them play Pitt State. But, since then there's just been a little inconsistency. I think the Harding defense will have a lot of answers for what Pitt does well. So I like Harding in this matchup.
Fair enough. Poe, where are you going, buddy?
Yeah, I'm going to take Pitt State at home, guys. I think I think you made some really good points. I think they're going to have they have the ability to stop that Harding offense. I think they're going to be able to do that. And I'm going to have faith that their offense and at home in a playoff game in November is going to be able to execute. So I'm going to take Pitt State.
I have an uncertainty with the Pitt offense, and their quarterback Chad Dotson left just before half against Northwest. What seemed like probably a concussion or something like that, maybe a shoulder injury, and he did not return yesterday. And their next quarterback is, I think, thrown 5 passes this year, and does not have a lot of experience in college. So my concern is that that's a real tough ask if that presents itself against a Harding defense that's going to come after you. And Ferg is
exasperated by something.
So you couldn't tell us that beforehand. You gonna wait?
I'm telling you, man.
Is it my job to do your research?
Oh my god.
So that's
yep.
That said,
right
now hey, let's if it's a concussion, he's 50-50 on returning. With or without him, I've been concerned about the Pitt offense for a good while. And I think Harding's going to go there with something to prove.
And 5 for 5, Ferg, maybe you have a fantasy pickup there.
Yeah, the swing passes that accumulated 5 yards was not terribly productive.
Hey,
but
Chuck, they don't track completion percentage in fantasy.
Yeah,
that doesn't do you any good.
Completions for that matter.
So that's saying I'm taking Harding on the road.
Sure you are.
And there's an applause in the comments. No. Okay, moving on to Super Region 4. Oh, I'm going to contain my excitement here. Chuck, I'm going to let you start off. Mankato traveling to Augustana. How do you see it?
Well, I misread this one a couple of weeks ago, and it just doesn't seem like there's anything that's changed that will, with these two teams, it's going to change the outcome of this game in a second meeting. Good God, Poe, you've been muting yourself all night to sneeze and cough, and you missed it while making my pick.
I'm sorry.
It's wide open now. Look out.
Yeah, all right.
Anyway, I don't think enough has changed about either of these teams that changes the outcome from a couple weeks ago. So, like I said, I misread it a couple weeks ago. I'm not going to do that again. I think this is an Augie win.
Fair enough. Ferg, how do you see this one?
I generally ride with Minnesota State, but I agree. I don't think there's a whole lot that's sort of changed here. And last week doesn't feel very good either for Mankato in my eyes. So I'm going to go with Augie.
Berg, no more Hoffner, we trust.
No, not this game.
Now you got horns. You got horns down here.
No, I'm not going to do it.
Wow, Ferg, you've turned.
You got horns on both of them. What's he supposed
Hold
to
on,
do?
I got Hoffner on line 1. Hold on. Okay, Tony, how do you see this one?
You can take everything that Chuck said and just press replay, including his commentary on Coach Poe not learning how to work the mute button. I take Augustana.
Now, Poe, would you like to toot your horn before we get going or anything? You're up next.
Make sure you gesticulate a lot so that your camera's going all over the place.
Yes. Well, you'll have to explain that to us afterwards on the show, because either you're moving or it's moving or something's moving.
It's because I'm moving.
Oh, okay.
It's technology, Whit. I'll have to get a diagram and draw it up for you.
Yeah, funny thing, mine stays in the same place, but yeah.
Damn millennials. And their newfangled technology.
Hey now.
No, I'm going to take Augie at home. I'm agree with everything you guys said.
Fair enough. Chuck, I fully agree with everything you mentioned on that. My concern is that Mankato is 3-3 in their last 6 games, and it doesn't feel like they're ending. I've said this for weeks that I think that they've got a high ceiling, but I've been seeing a little bit more of the floor recently than the ceiling. And I think Augustana at home was a little more consistent, and they seem to kind of have Mankato's number. Mankato is just going to have to flat out prove that to show different. I think Augie wins their 4th straight against Mankato here in the last 2 seasons.
Wow.
Central Washington. at Western Colorado. Chuck, I'm going to start off with you, buddy.
May as well, because I blow it on Western Colorado picks every time we have them in here. For some reason, I just can't read them right. When I pick them, they lose. When I go against them, they win. I do think this is a very interesting rematch from last year, one that Central Washington won. And I have every confidence that Central Washington can win that again this year. But you know what? It's time for Western Colorado to win one of these big games, especially at home. I don't really have a lot of really good reasons for it, but I'm going to go with the Mountaineers just because I think they're due. I think that they've had some playoff disappointments, and I think that they will have learned from that, and I think they're going to win this one.
Fair enough. Coach Poe, where are you going?
I'm very alarmed at what Chuck just said. Like, what he picks, it doesn't really work out when it deals with Western Colorado. However, it's kind of a toss-up for me. I personally, as I'm sitting here looking at Western Colorado, Matt, the logo is badass. So give me Western Colorado. I'm riding out.
We're at that point in the show where we're picking logos. Good
That's
deal.
right.
Well, we only got a few games left, guys. So, Tony, how do you see this one?
I share a similar fate with Chuck, that whenever I pick with Western Colorado, I never seem to be on the correct end of it. So, however, I am going to diverge at that point. And Central Wash over the last couple of seasons has shown that they are adaptable. They travel really well. They had a great run in the playoffs last year, so they know what it takes to be able to pull these things off away from home. So I'm taking Central Wash.
Berg, how do you see this one?
Well, there have been issues with Western and especially in some of these big games, but I'm not exactly convinced that Central Washington can be consistent enough that you feel pretty good about picking them either. Either it's an offense issue when they're playing teams above 500, or it's a special teams issue. And yes, they play well away from on the road and things like that. But I'm going to go with Western. I think Western has a little bit more to work with that gives me more comfort than Central does.
I think Western Colorado's got a far higher ceiling. I think that Drew Nash can sometimes really be the guy for them. But there's also Central Washington burned me twice last year in the playoffs, and Kennedy McGill is as strong a running quarterback as we've got in D2, and a lot of +1 type stuff, along with Tyler Flanagan. And I think they're physical enough and good enough up front that they will still be able to find a way to win a lower scoring game. I think if this game moves up, I think it's Western Colorado all day. But I'm going to take Central Washington right here. Bemidji State at Angelo State. Coach Poe, I'm going to start you off.
Yeah, I'm going to take Angelo at home.
Fair enough. Tony, how do you see this one?
Same as Coach Poe. And this is strictly a gut call for me because I think Bemidji is actually better than people think, and maybe even than their 8-3 suggests. But Angelo has really been playing increasingly better week to week over the last couple of months, so I'll take them to defend the home field.
Berg, how do you see this one?
I know Angelo folks got to be like, man, that K-Berg guy got to be the most haterific guy out there because when I don't pick them, they do win, but I don't pick them often. Except for last week. I'm going to go with Bemidji. I think that, if there's an upset to be had, that this one could be the one to slow the Rams down.
Fair enough. Chuck, how do you see this one?
Well, I'm picking Angelo State. I love the run that they've been on, and getting through their conference undefeated was a really, really good accomplishment for them. That said, if there's a spoiler in this field, it might be Bemidji. I think if there's a team that could go on a run the way Central Washington did last year, maybe get all the way to the finals as a road dog, Bemidji has what it takes to upset this entire bracket. I'm convinced of that. But I am going with Angelo State to win this one at home.
Well,
Come on.
two of the best defensive lines in the tournament both really get after you up front. Angelo State's very athletic team. I think they're going to have a little bit of speed on Bemidji State, and Angelo's been red hot lately. But with all the other picks I'm going to get right this week, I'm going to have room to shoot for an upset. I'm going to take Bemidji State playing their style of football and finding a way to win on the road here.
All right. So I believe that was I wasn't keeping track, but I think that was all 12 games for
It sure was.
the super regions.
Now, Chuck, we got a treat for our fans. And I don't mean the stuff with Poe doing all of the visuals and everything. We actually have something new that tell them a little bit about what we've got next.
Well, you started talking treats. I thought we were going back to Boss's Pizza, but
Right,
Well,
exactly.
the sooner we wrap this up, the sooner I'll be eating, but that's another story.
do you want to mention that starting probably as soon as tomorrow, maybe, if you remember, if you've been with us for a while, last year we did a series of playoff specials for the postseason. We did 4 regional podcasts, so one for each super region, brought in some extra help for those. We had a lot of fun doing those shows last year. We will be doing that again this year. So we'll have playoff podcasts for all 4 super regions. Really looking forward to doing that. I'm going to be joined by Kerry Moyer to do Super Region 1. Super Region 2 will mostly be K-Ferg and Poe. I may dip in there just to kind of help while Poe's traveling. And Super Region 3 is going to be Whit, Tony, and of course John Dykstra, who is the regular analyst on MIAA Weekly. I think that'll be a fantastic show for the stacked Super Region 3. And of course in SR4, Whit's home region, he will host and analyze along with our good friend Antonio Clark, breaking down everything happening in SR4. So can't wait to get those started.
We will have a special guest with us. Tune in to find out.
All right, so that you've already got some anticipation building for that. So can't wait to get those started. We had a lot of fun doing that last year.
All about the anticipation, Chuck. That's how we do this.
All right. Well, we kind of teased a little bit that we had some picks to go through. Obviously, we went through the first round games, but we thought since we have a big audience here, this is usually the biggest audience we get all year when we're kind of reacting to the playoff bracket. We thought let's roll out our kind of picks for the 4 super regions and then who we think will be the national champion. Now, of course, I want to preface, we only saw the bracket at the same time all of you did. So seeing the paths to that these teams have to take, we don't really know what that looks like until we see the bracket. So we didn't have a whole lot of time to digest this, but we're going to put our picks down. So you see mine. I'm going with Kutztown in Super Region 1. I think that's really close with a couple of other teams there, but I'm going with the Golden Bears. I like Valdosta State in SR3 or SR2. SR3 is going to be really, really jam tight. We know that, but I like Ferris to come out of there, and then I like Ferris to win the national championship. You can see there as well. But I do like Angelo State to win Super Region 4 as long as they survive that matchup with Bemidji, which we already talked about as a big one. So those are my picks. Whit, who's up next?
Justin's picks. Justin, tell us a quick summation of what you got here, buddy.
Yeah, so I had Kutztown winning Super Region 1. Valdosta coming out of Super Region 2. I was really impressed with what they did yesterday and just kind of the way that team is going right now. I think they're trending in the right direction. This was a really hard decision. I did take Grand Valley in Super Region 3. They were my pick going into the season. Excuse me. They were my pick going into it. It's just a gut feel on that one. But Super Region 3 really is a coin toss. 3 weeks from now, maybe who the heck knows. And then Super Region 4, I did take Pueblo to win that, and then I did take Grand Valley to win the national championship. But I'll tell you what, Super Region 3 is a coin toss to me because you don't know who's coming out of there. And I was really impressed with Valdosta State. So if they're sitting there at the end of the season, it wouldn't surprise me. But I'm going to stay with Grand Valley, guys. I'm just going to stick with my gut. It's what I felt in the beginning of the season, and I'm going to stick with it.
All right. Let's move along, and we've got K-Ferg next. K-Ferg, tell us about it.
Well, Super Region 1, I'm kind of like everybody else. Kutztown. I just don't see someone who will challenge, especially on that defense in particular. Super Region 2, to me, it came down to Wingate and Valdosta State. But I think Valdosta has learned a lot from last year and has become more diverse on offense and stronger on defense. And I think that would serve them well in the playoffs. Super Region 3 was really hard to pick. If Pitt could get past Harding, I like their chances, especially because they can lean on that defense some. But yeah, that first round game is a heck of a game, and I struggled like everybody else did with Super Region 3. And then Super Region 4, I thought about an NSIC team out of conference, but I just couldn't really hone in on whom. I thought Mankato could be one that maybe they pull it together and string together some wins, but I'm a little afraid of their inconsistency right now. And then Augie also could be one, but again, is the NSIC just beating up on itself, or it's just a really, really strong league that can really make some damage in the playoffs? Is what I'm really looking at for Super Region 4. But I thought Pueblo was kind of the safe pick at this point, and Angelo's got the defense as well, but a lot to really consider in Super Region 4 as well. But I went with Pueblo for now.
Well, I have Kutztown. I think their defense and the way that they play, they got a nice seasoned quarterback. They run the ball fairly well. I like the way that they control the action. I like them in SR1. Wouldn't be shocked. This is going to make people in the comments, some people's heads are going to blow up. I wouldn't be shocked if they made it to the championship game. Let that just ring out for a minute. And I've got Valdosta. I think that Valdosta will find a home game throughout and get themselves in a real strong position to make it to that championship game. Harding, you know what? If they didn't have such a tough road, I would probably land on them for my national champion. I just think that's a huge ask, but I still like them. They've been more level than most of the other teams in the field who've had ups and downs. And I think Pueblo's got the highest ceiling from what I've seen in anybody in Super Region 4. And they've got a bye. So for me, that kind of lends to that. Tony, you've got some different picks than what I had here. And, tell us a little bit. You've got Kutztown, obviously. We've all kind of made a case there. But tell me about, moving along your Wingate pick.
Yeah, so, and honestly, I was feeling myself falling into the trap of taking all the safe picks, so I kind of forced myself not to. So Kutztown is really the only safe pick I made. I really actually thought hard about putting Charleston in that SR1 spot, but Kutztown got there last year, so I just feel like that's, they know what they're doing to be able to make that happen. I think Wingate's got the best defense in all of SR2, and so to me, that travels well, especially if they have to go to Valdosta in a few weeks. So to me, I like the Bulldogs, and maybe that was a little bit unexpected, but to me, I think that's a team that's shown I think the most consistency in in terms of the qualities that it's shown that it's taken to get out of SR2 in the last few years. So I like them there. Pueblo to me is the safest pick in SR4. I took Angelo strictly for the role that they've been on, but I mean, if you look at what Pueblo can do when they are on, that's the best team in Super Region 4. When they're on and put together, I don't see anybody that can stop them. Whether they do that or not, that's going to be the question. And I think it's a similar story for Grand Valley. And like Coach Poe, I picked Grand Valley at the beginning of the season. And so I am going to stay with the ship, whether it sinks or not. But I'll be honest with you. I'm looking at this Grand Valley team and what they've looked like over the last stretch of weeks. And I talked about being the roller coaster guy earlier in the show. That's what I'm doing here, too. I picked them at the beginning of the season, so I'll stick with them. But I honestly look at that bracket, and I'm struggling to figure out how they're going to do it because it's not an easy first-round game against a difficult Indianapolis team. They are going to get an extremely physical game in the second round if they get there, regardless of whether they play Pitt State or Harding. And then presumably they'd have to go up to Big Rapids to take on a Ferris team that has been extremely consistent, since those first couple of weeks and some of the difficulties that they ran through with injuries and losing at Pitt State. that's been the most predictable team really in the GLIAC. Even though they've had a couple of tough games the last couple of weeks, they figured out how to win them. Grand Valley offensively, you don't know what you're going to get from week to week. Sometimes you get Avery Moore playing a stretch, and sometimes you don't. Sometimes you get Vinny Meshi coming in and having a good game, and then sometimes you don't. Ike Dengu's had some good series. Sometimes you don't. You watched 4 offensive linemen go off the field up at Michigan Tech a couple of weeks ago. How many of those guys are going to be able to play during the playoffs? I look at that team, but they're kind of similar to Pueblo in that when they're on and put together, nobody's really going to be able to deal with them. But you've only seen it in flashes this year. You haven't been able to see them to put really 60 minutes together doing that. So I think they can, and I'm sticking with them again because I picked them at the beginning of the season. But I think for Kayford coined it or nailed it. The Super Region 3 is a coin flip, but I think whoever comes out of it's still going to be the best team that's left in the Final Four.
Fair enough.
All right, so those are our picks for the Super Regions and for National Champion. Of course, did we get through all of them? What did you do yours? You did.
We
yours,
sure
right?
did. I'm just
Okay.
letting everybody kind of see. We
All
have
right,
Chuck with Ferris. We've got Justin with Grand Valley. We've got Ferg with Pitt. We got Whit with Valdosta, and we've got Tony with Grand Valley. And we did not plan it this way. So the fact that we had a lot of variety there was actually a good thing.
Yeah, and so if your national championship winning pick is eliminated, then you're off the show for the rest of the year. That's what we decided, right?
It's like an elimination thing. Wow.
Right. So
Beautiful.
I have to talk to my guy Tremaine. We got a lot on this now.
obviously
No
we'll
idea.
be picking round by round throughout the whole thing, but those are just kind of our initial thoughts. And I think most of you have been around long enough to know it's really about creating some dialogue and be able to talk about different teams, not necessarily to celebrate picks down the road. But those are our picks. I was going through the chat, Whit. I know you were too. There's obviously a lot of discussion, a lot of dialogue about the rankings, about some of the matchups. We talked about a lot of that. I starred a couple of things to go back and talk through. So I think we've got a few minutes if you guys want to do some questions and answers. Whit, do you have anything that you starred that you want to lead with?
Yeah, let's go. I'm going to bring this one on up first. And who got snubbed? And I know there's been quite a bit of dialogue about that. Ferg, I was sorry I put you back in a bad place there. But I really felt that, guys, during the course of the show, we kind of talked a little bit about who was being perceived as getting snubbed and kind of how we saw some of that. SR2, somebody was going to get that feeling. And I thought we kind of walked through a lot of that. I don't think there was a whole lot of cases for being snubbed in the overall scheme of things, if I'm going to be real frank. And I don't think we were shocked by the field. Ferg, SR2, it was my exception there. I know. Ferg, I'm not even going to make you talk again because you already plowed that field, my friend.
Yeah. So along those lines, I'll bring up a couple kind of along those lines. This question, I'm assuming maybe this was brought up just looking at the timing around the time that we're running through some of the super regions. No, they don't have 7 10-1 teams, but they have 4 10-1 teams in Super Region 3 and then 2 9-1 teams. So, just looking at the records, when we talk about some of the teams in that region, I know that there's a 9-2, there's a couple of 8-3s that had really good performances, but when you look at how competitive that region is, you just weren't going to get in the playoffs as an 8-3, and there's even a 9-2 that didn't make it. It was just that busy.
Yeah, I think no, there are 5 of the teams that were, I think, officially 10-1, and in Grand Valley was 10-1, but they had a D3 school on the so it wasn't
Right.
it wasn't 10-1 against D2 teams.
Yeah, good point there, Tony. When we talk about playoffs, then we're really looking at just the D2 competition because that's all that they look at and assess in the playoffs. Let's do a couple of others. There's a comment that we were talking about JCSU, technically Livingstone, not a bad loss. I agree. I think you're right. The Fayetteville State loss the week before was the worst loss. Ferg, do you think that's a fair assessment?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the fact that they got shut out the week after beating Winston-Salem State, nobody expected that, and that was just ugly. I mean, quite honestly, John C. Smith kind of was just on the wrong track, and that's not what you want to show going into the playoffs. And so, I agree.
Right.
Yeah,
right. I assume this is. I wanted to bring this up because again, this is just why head-to-head results cannot be everything. They are important when teams are close together, but they just can't be everything. I assume that Jerry is an IUP alum or fan. Yeah, you beat Ashland on the road, finished with the same number of losses, and didn't get in. IUP was never part of the conversation.
No.
Not even close. SOS below 500. A really, really bad loss to Edinburgh. Clearly the third best team in the PSAC West. So
1 and
yeah,
2
I know
against, 1 and 2 against 500 or better.
right.
Also.
There's just no credentials there that even made IUP part of the conversation, and that's why head-to-head results can't always be a part of it. And maybe Jerry's just more that Ashland shouldn't be there, but somebody from the GMAC had to be there, and they are the best one to be in there. Talking about Ashland, Charleston is fun. Talking about Charleston, John, we only talk about Charleston on MIAA Weekly. That is where the appropriate Charleston dialogue is supposed to be. So be prepared when you do your SR3 podcast to talk about Charleston.
Chuck, we also got another one I'm going to bring on up here with Inkblot. I thought this was, and by the way, we didn't mention it all on this show, but Inkblot has been great with us, kind of hand in hand with everything, with projections and things of that sort. He produces the data that give us all an opportunity to interpret how things might or should or do play out. And that's tremendous. And I get along well with him. And he's just really, he's great in through this whole process. And the fact that he offers us a nugget like this, I was not aware of what first-time matchups we had here. So it looks like Ashland and Charleston and Carson Newman at Miles.
Yeah, cool. Very good stuff. Yeah, and yeah, absolutely. We use Inkblot's website, Inkblot Sports. It's just a great place to look at all the data and find out about all the things that we talk about. You know, when we're talking all those metrics, the strength of schedule, the wins against teams over 500. A lot of that is using the data that's compiled by Inkblot Sports. So it's an invaluable tool for us. All right, let's wind this down. ESU is 10-1. Yep, sorry about that, Jordan. That's on me. Just data entry, trying to get this stuff ready once we learned what the playoff field was. You're right. East Stroudsburg is a 10-1 football team. I had them in the screenshot as a 9-1 team. I think we covered this, but I think it is worth talking about. Avery Moore limited action. Is that just by design, Tony?
Nobody tells me stuff, guys, so I don't have any more knowledge than anybody else. If I had to hazard a guess based on the types of series where he came in and then he would be out for a while and then he would come back in, I don't know if he's nursing injuries or if they're just trying to be strategic about getting other guys experience. I really can't answer that. So sorry, Mike. I wish I could be more help for you, but I really don't know specifically what the answer is. If the Grand Valley coaching staff wants to share that information, then your best bet's to ask them.
All right. I guess we'll kind of close with this one. I think we kind of already had a little bit of this dialogue. Who's considered the overall number one seed? This tournament doesn't really structure in a way that there is like an overall number one seed, kind of the way the FCS system does. You saw us make our picks, so I guess that kind of means who we would lean to as the overall number one seed. But yeah, hopefully we'll get to a point where we have a little bit of a different structure where we would do something like that. But
well,
right now,
I think if these played out with, let's say, your favorites, for example, I think Valdosta with their really high KPI, undefeated, along with the either Grand Valley or Ferris, if those two came out of Super Region 3, I think those would be the teams battling for getting a home semifinal. That's just what I'm seeing just at a quick look at it. But, you know, their numbers are going to change here along the way with who they play as well. So it's nothing more than just a early throwing a dart at it.
Right. Yeah, it's an interesting thing to ponder, but unfortunately, the way this tournament works, it really doesn't matter who we would consider to be the overall number one seed in the tournament until we get through the regional brackets. So,
yeah, they're going to reseed the Final Four based on what's there. So I'm with Whit. We could theorize as to what that would look like if all 4 1 seeds get there. But again, you got to look at what the body of work that they accomplished during the playoff runs actually gets accounted for as well. So it's hard to really predict that.
Right. Agree. All right. Well, guys, that's going to be the show for tonight. Packed full. We had a lot to go through with the playoff field, some analysis there, going through all the regions. Made our picks for all of the playoff games. We're very excited about the first round coming up. And of course, we will be back a week from tonight to recap everything that happens in the first round, set the stage for the second round. But do not forget, throughout this week, pay attention, look for the socials, visit the website because we'll have info about those regional podcasts. And of course, all of our writers who do written columns, a lot of them will still continue to publish as well. So be sure you're checking in daily, and then we'll see you back here next week for another episode of Inside D2 Football. See you, everyone.